Hello, everyone. This is Deb with the UAP Medical Coalition. Today I'm speaking to Steve Aspin. I'm going to let Steve tell you a little bit about his background and why we were interested in speaking to him today. Steve, can you please tell people a little bit about your background on this topic?
Yeah, I come from a family line, which is one of the things that the book explores, of serial abductees. The phenomenon, as I've come to understand it, has been a thing since about 1890, so it's about 130 years. And the entities who prosecute this program, because it's a program they're carrying out, follow family lines. They follow, in my case, it's in every generation, it's been the first child of that generation. I don't have any evidence that subsequent children were involved in this, but some researchers into this phenomenon would differ with that opinion. They would consider that all the children of abductees are abductees. You only need one parent who's in the program for one of the children to be chosen and focused on. So I'm the fourth in the line. My great grandmother was born in 1873, and I contend the program began in the 1890s. We can go into that if you like during this interview, because it's quite a complicated story, but I bring quite a lot of evidence to verify this in the book, that it did actually almost certainly start in the 1890s. And my grandmother was born in 1908, and my mother was born in 1935, and I was born in 1956. I have no children, and so I'll probably be the last in the line. So I come from that family line. I didn't actually work out that I was in this program, this abduction program, until I was 51 years old. I had a lot of clues during my adult life and indeed in my childhood, but I didn't really put the pieces together. I always thought that all the strange things that were happening to me were some weird thing, some weird occult thing to do with ancestral stuff. It's only in 2007 that I finally acknowledged that this was the alien abduction thing that was happening to me, because all the pieces fitted together. I had sightings of unidentified flying objects in my adult life, 3 or 4 of which I detail in my book Out of Time and describe. Some of these events were witnessed by other people, not just me. And I had bodily scarring, the kind of bodily scarring that all abductees, well, not all abductees, but a lot of abductees experience. So I have these scars that appear on the skin, in straight line cuts, incisions like pinprick needle incisions, scoop mark scars. I've got 2 scoop mark scars, one behind my knee on one leg, and another behind the right shoulder. So I've had those things. I had bruising around the ankles, which is a hallmark of abductions. Occasionally I wake up with bruising, almost like I've had kind of shackles around my ankles that are all the way around. And these have been photographed, and the photo illustrations are in the book Out of Time, the photographs of these injuries. So I've had all these things. The experiential markers are from infancy, when I was paralyzed and abducted at night once every few weeks. As I've already stated, I didn't know that it was anything at all to do with unidentified flying objects or alien life forms or any of that. I just thought it was this Magonia stuff. I didn't know the word Magonia, but that sort of Magonia stuff, the fairies, the pixies, the folk tales, the folklore. That's what I've cloaked it in, and it was wrong. You know, that a lot of people believe that the abduction phenomenon conforms to that, and they believe that in some way that whole fiction, if you like, is responsible for it, but it's not. It's something completely different. So I brought all this stuff together, my personal experience and my research and study, and the experiences, the things I've learned from people who've studied this phenomenon, and used a lot of my medical and forensic and biochemical knowledge. And I've brought all this together in this book out of time, but it does contain quite a lot of forensic, medical and scientific information and reports, medical scientific reports of, as an example, of bodily implants, hair uncovered from abduction events, which we had analyzed at Microtrace LLC in Illinois, and the reporters is in the book. In summary, it's everything I've learned about it, and I've kind of tried to bring everything together in the concluding chapters to give my opinions about what this thing is, what is actually going on, and the agencies responsible for it, and that explains all the essential characteristics of the what's known as the alien abduction phenomenon.
Thank you for that summary. That was actually a very informative summary, and it touched on some of the things I want to talk about today. So the first thing is that, you know, people are going to want to know if you actually visually saw non-human intelligence. Did you visually see, like, I know you compared it to Magonia, which for anyone who's not aware is part of a Jacques Vallée book called Passport to Magonia. But what were you seeing?
Well, probably the most stunning example, and it's one of very, very few where I witnessed grey aliens, for want of a better word. There's this these creatures who abductees report come in two sizes, two varieties. They're tall ones who are about 5 feet or 5'6" in height, and they're short ones who are about 3 feet in height. In 2006, I was took a business trip to Sardinia. I had an experience overnight, and I woke up. I won't go into that, but I woke up lying on the top of the bedclothes on the, you know, one of these duvets, isn't it? We call them in the United States a quilt or something, I think you call it. I was lying on top of it with my legs on top of the bedclothes. My female companion was beside me on the other side of the double bed, fast asleep, facing the wall, absolutely, completely unconscious. And I was sitting up in bed as if I'd been reading or something, you know, like sitting up in bed. And in front of me, in the room, in the flesh, were two of these little grey aliens standing right in front of me. And between the two was a third figure. And this looked exactly like my father, who had died 3 years earlier. And he absolutely convinced it was him, because it was 100% him. And I could almost reach out and touch him, but these entities are about 3 meters away from me. And he said to me, he looked at me and said to me, "It's time to go, Steve," which is, I later learned, it's what these little greys say when they say goodbye to you. It's time to go, Steve. And then the whole image shimmered, and they faded out. The three figures faded out and left a white glow in the room, like a great big oval-shaped bubble where they'd been, and this slowly faded out over several seconds and disappeared. One of these little grey aliens was on his left, and one was on his right, and the one standing on his right side was holding a thing like a large letter H, metal letter H, like about the size and diameter of a telescopic television area from the 1950s, or a car aerial from the 1960s. You know, it used to telescope out. It looked like that, and it was in a letter H format, and it was as tall as he was, and he was holding it in one hand like that. The other alien had nothing in its hands. But I later came to understand that this image was of my father was actually a projection that they put into my mind. They can do that. They can project these images into your mind, and they make abductees think all sorts of things that they put them into your mind, but they're not real. They're only real in your mind. And all of abductees claim to have meetings with departed relatives, you know, relatives who died. This is what they're seeing. They're seeing projections that these aliens have taken from your memory banks and have put back into your mind to placate you or to hold your attention while they finish doing something. So that's the one time I came face to face in full consciousness with grey aliens in the flesh, a couple of meters away from me, in an everyday setting, not on board a UFO, but actually in a hotel room.
Okay, and I think that is the crux of it, that's something that people are curious about. They want to know what's doing this to people. Could you summarize for people some of the other indicators of an experiencer?
In chapter 3 of the book, it titled The Program, I list out 35 different indicators that abductees would know, many of which an abductee would recognize. I think if an abductee recognizes any 10 of these as relating to them, then he's probably, or she is probably in the program. And many abductees recognize far more than that.
It includes having experienced lost time, fear of travel.
It's not fear of travel. It's fear of if you. Some abductees, not all, but some, won't travel down a certain stretch of road.
Right.
That because they know that 20 years ago something really bad happened there, and they can never remember it, and they can never put their finger on it, but they avoid that stretch of road. They'll go miles around sometimes in order not to go down there, because some of them have panic attacks when they go down that stretch of road. It's when they had an abduction experience at that place. So that's an experiential marker.
Right,
Sorry, I interrupted you.
I'm certainly not going to read all of them because I think it's unfair to,
because we'd be here for a couple of days.
Yes, but I wanted to address a few more. So another one is this compulsion to fulfill a secret mission in life. Now, I feel that one comes up often. People who are drawn to this topic, they're not even always people who have seen a craft or have that they remember, or have seen something that we could call non-human intelligence. But there's a lot of people who feel a compulsion to be involved with this topic, even when they're really tired of all the games that are being played and all the secrecy and lack of transparency. We just keep working on it. So what do you think that compulsion or that calling feeling comes from?
They are persuaded that by the aliens that it's a complicated phenomenon. One of the things the tall grey beings are engineered to do, because I believe they're genetically engineered beings, these tall and small greys. I don't think they're the instigators of the program. I think they're the workers. But one of the things that the tall aliens, one set of abilities that's genetically engineered into them, and they're taught how to do. One of the things they can do is they persuade abductees to believe they're special and to believe they're part of something special, and they've been chosen for something. They put all this, they program them to think that. And a lot of abductees just go around believing for years and years and years that there's something special about them. They're not normal. They don't really fit into society. They've been chosen to do something. One day something will happen, something cataclysmic or dramatic will happen in the world. And a lot of them have just told me, I always knew that the big change was coming. And when the change comes, I will know what to do. And that's the kind of thing they say.
Why do you think NHI wants to activate people in this way? And why do you think
Yeah.
NHI would want people to be
I
like that?
don't know that they are actually going to do that. I just know that they persuade abductees that that's something that they'll go through in the future. If this great cataclysm or great change does come, then we can talk about that. But it may be that it's not going to pan out in the way that abductees are persuaded it will. But I know that this is what abductees believe is going to happen.
Okay. Do you think that it is a persuasive technique to keep the person calm or on
I
their
don't know.
side?
Maybe. I mean, I speculate about this in the book a little bit. I know that they do these things. That's absolutely definite. They do these things. Why they do them is much more difficult question to answer, because people have all kinds of ideas about this. At a very mundane level, they like to keep the abductee cooperative. It's important to know that abductees, some abductees in particular, you'd say experiencers, but I think it amounts to the same thing. It's just a question of terminology. Are repeatedly persuaded by a variety of stratagems to cooperate or be helpful or want to assist in what these aliens are doing. That's a very common thing. If the humans are allowed to be in control of their faculties and their nervous systems when in their presence, they can't allow that to happen, because they see uncontrolled humans as potentially highly dangerous to them. One of the things they do is they are able to suspend the atomic structures of matter, so they can travel through walls and emerge on the other side, fully formed without any damage. And I've seen alien entities actually move through a glass door and enter the room from outside. And the abductees all over the world report they do this, and it's not supposed to be possible, but they do it. So that's some kind of technology they're using, which can suspend the atomic structures of matter. Abductees sometimes report that they're taken out of bed and they stand up. They're not elevated out of bed and lifted all the time. They can sometimes stand up, and the aliens lead them by the hand and walk them into an adjacent room or a different part of the house where there's a big glass window, and they take them through there. So it seems to be easier for them to transport them through those structures when they're thinner, when there's not so much matter to interfere. But that's done with technology. That's done. I think maybe the for want of a better phrase, the flying saucer, the UAP, the vessel they use, has that technology rather than the individual alien always. But it might be possible that the individual abductors have the thing, a handheld thing sometimes.
What's interesting is that goes back to the idea of Magonia, because if you are familiar with fairy lore, one of the things people would do was they would use metals to protect themselves. So I wonder if that would be something that would be harder to get through, like, say, iron.
It's a good point. I know of one person, not an abductee himself, but when he was studying the abduction program with Bud Hopkins. Actually, he's a household name academic. He's really extremely well-known individual. He had his office built in the basement, in the cellar in the basement of his house, and he had the walls lined with lead because he believed that would keep them out.
Did it work? Do you know?
I don't know. I would imagine so.
I know that people have tried to come up with ways to get some evidence on these experiences. I know
Yeah.
MUFON had like a little black box that they gave to experiencers to try to record an encounter. Um, so, do you think there's no way for people to have that evidence other than other witnesses and the physical evidence that they have?
Well, it depends on the someone else. Really, it depends on the audience and how skeptical they are, or how, if they can be convinced by scientific forensic medical reports, or whether they find those they find it more persuasive to listen to abductees who have extremely powerful emotional stories, or I really don't. It just depends so much on the individual. Bud Hopkins, who was a friend of mine towards the end of his life, I spent a lot of time with him. He explained to me one day that as far as he'd been able to calculate, there were different types of responses to the alien abduction, and indeed the whole UAP UFO phenomenon. And there are basically four types, and one of these types is people who are skeptical. They are healthily skeptical. They are convinced only by evidence, but they are convinced that persuaded by evidence to take something seriously. And they tend not to be fooled by hoaxes, and they tend not to be too gullible, but they will engage with the subject if they're persuaded that there's something in it. And another type is what he called, the New Age positives. These are very, very common in the UFO, UAP study field, who are convinced by whatever the aliens are doing, it's to humanity's benefit, and they are higher beings and who want to save us and take us to the next level of evolution and all this, And the third category was people who he called the true believers. And the true believers, Bud said, the true believers believe that UFO abductions don't exist with all the religious certainty with which the Pope believes in the virgin birth. So there's no way you can persuade these people, no matter what evidence you lay in front of them. They always manage to twist it and say, oh, they did it, all this bodily scarring, they do it to themselves. They're just seeking attention. Or medical reports, they'll just dismiss and say, oh, that's got to be a fraud. Because it's the ideological framework is so strong that they resist all reality, basically. So he compared them to Islamic fundamentalists and religious fundamentalists. And the fourth category he identified as, I think, the largest category of people that there are in society, what he called the incurious. They're not really interested in the phenomenon, and they kind of shrug their shoulders when they come up against it. They wouldn't watch the congressional hearings on UAPs because they're not interested. They're much more interested in the football or the baseball league or racing cars or fishing, whatever they're doing, and they're just not interested in it, and they cannot be interested in it. They can't be persuaded to be interested in it. They're the incurious.
Yeah, I was going to say we could probably add to that list now. I think there's a lot of other types now, including
Yes, sure.
the people like myself who just see it as part of nature and don't understand why it's not being explored. Like,
Yeah.
I just think it's part of reality.
It's certainly part of reality. Whether it's part of nature, I don't know whether I necessarily use that expression, but it is certainly part of reality.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
So I have some questions related to these doctors that you were working alongside when you had your
Yeah.
business. Did you ever talk to them about any of your experiences?
Not once. I thought that if I introduced this, to one of them, he'd tell others, and I'd start being shunned, if you will, for want of a better word, as a bit of a nutcase. I think it's so socially unacceptable, and it's so outside the paradigms of how these people think, and they're so driven by their careers, and they're so focused on their surgical specialty, and they're so scientifically orientated. They don't have room for it in their ecology. I mean, it'll take a long time until such people accept it. There's a minority of them, say, like John Mack, and he wasn't the only one. A number of other doctors, like John Mack, who embrace the abduction narrative as something real and something that deserves investigation, deserves exploration.
I have that mixed response too among the mental health professionals that I speak to about this. Some of them are like, "Oh, that's interesting." Some of them are, "Maybe you should keep that to yourself." But some of
Mm.
them go, "I've had an experience also." Well, what do you think they should do if they have someone coming to them describing encountering UAPs or non-human intelligence? What do you think they should do to help their patients?
Well, those who are sympathetic to the idea of the phenomenon, yeah, presumably.
Well, all of
Um,
them.
I'm not sure I can counsel you on that because I'm not a physician. So, it would be fantastic if there were a caucus of medical professionals out in the open who maybe like yourself, in is the medic the what's the name of your organization? The UAP Medical Alliance?
Medical Coalition, UAP
Medical Coalition,
Medical
beg your pardon.
Coalition.
UAP Medical Coalition. Are you reasonably open, and do you have access? Do you have a network of colleagues in the medical and surgical community?
Yeah, we work with Opus for the experiencer support, and
Yeah,
we also tell people about the For Experiencer Group. We have a
right,
list of
right.
places that have public acknowledgement. There are therapists who are willing to openly help people. Medical doctors, it's a little trickier. As we all know, they're a little bit more cautious, and I think that they're
Sure.
just taught to treat the symptoms. But I
Yeah.
think sometimes some symptoms are ignored,
Mm,
or dismissed, or completely missed altogether when
mm,
people don't openly, like, bring up the fact that there was a UAP encounter.
mm. Yeah. Do you know of similar organizations such as yours outside the United States?
Yes, there are a
You do?
growing number of organizations, including in the UK.
Really? I don't know of any in the UK. So maybe you could introduce me to those, or at least give me their contact information,
Yes, I
because
will.
I don't know any. The risk you have is specialists who are sympathetic to this, who are willing to work with abductees, are getting inundated with tons of people, because there are there is a lot of abductees in the population. Is a lot. I mean, I asked the question in one of the later chapters, chapter 8, which is titled Question Time. How many abductees are there in the population? And I bring a fair bit of evidence to the table and research on this. And it's somewhere between 2% and 5% of the global population, so far as I know. The population is 9 billion at the moment. The global population is 9 billion. So you can work out, I think If it's 5% of the population, it's like 400,000 or something like that. I mean, it's ridiculous. 400 million in the global population. Now, 95% of people don't actually know their abilities. They just don't know anything. They know they have really weird lives and they keep things to themselves and they have strange feelings and compulsions. And, you know, if they were to read this book, which the vast majority of them never will, they would see that maybe this list of 35 indicators that we discussed about 30 minutes ago, a number of these things would apply to them, but they're not going to get exposed to it in their normal lives, you know. So it's very difficult to assess what might happen if this were much more public and assistance was offered to these people. Basically, most people, I mean, people like Bud and Dave and Dave Jacobs and Bud Hopkins, John Mack, they did everything free, you know, and it's a considerable personal cost, financial cost to themselves sometimes, and certainly in terms of time, they devoted a huge amount of personal time to these people, and they never charged a red cent to anybody, you know, because they didn't think it was ethical to do so. So if you're a working physician or a working psychologist, you are used to getting paid for your work, you know, by somebody. So they'd have to balance the work with abductees with their paid work somehow. And I think, you know, all this takes a lot of adjusting to.
Yeah, and honestly, there's this very strange thing that happens with the UAP community where money becomes a very sensitive topic. And it's interesting because even though people put a lot of work into their research and they put a lot of work into writing or creating content, they're not allowed to get paid. It's like this weird feeling of like, and I don't think that happens for any other subject. Like tell an archaeologist they can't be paid for doing research
Sure.
or doing an investigation, or you know, it's very strange. And there's a lot of other strange things that I've discovered. There's a huge psychological issue with this topic. Like people just automatically shut down sometimes when this topic is brought up, even though we see bizarre things happening every day. You know, the technology we have today is getting really bizarre. Like they are creating paint that you can't see. Like they're using optical illusions to camouflage, you know, aircraft. Um,
Yes.
and yet still people, when they hear the attachment of this topic to possibly non-human, people shut down. And what's really interesting about that is we used to live alongside other hominids that were not
Yeah.
human, and yet people still can't handle it. Like they just shut down. It is odd how all of the paranormal seems to connect. Orbs are pervasive in every aspect, including spirits, um, the fairy realm. You know, orbs are definitely part of UAPs, and they're seen alongside cryptids. So
Yeah.
it's pretty peculiar how everything seems to be connected. And you,
Do you know George Knapp and Con Kelleher's books about the Skinwalker Ranch?
yes,
Uh,
hmm
where do you go with
yeah.
that?
Yes, there's
Yeah.
some very significant orbs, and it does seem that color is important for how the orb will interact with humans too. I've noticed that, and I've also noticed that the ones that are malevolent tend to be red and orange,
Red and orange.
or I should at least say the ones that survey around the military bases are often red orange.
Mm.
Yeah, so there's
Wow.
a lot for us to still figure out. And if anyone wants to put the time into doing the research, you know, maybe that will help them get past whatever it is that blocks people from being curious and wanting to understand. So I just have a couple more questions for you. Well, one of the things I wanted to ask is you said you really were uncomfortable with giving advice to medical professionals,
Yeah.
but I really want to know what you think will help experiencers come to terms with what they've encountered and what they've gone through.
Yeah, the main thing is to persuade them in a good way that a lot of people are having these experiences, and they're not it's not their fault. They're not chosen to have these experiences necessarily, and that it's fairly common, not universal, but fairly common, and they shouldn't deny it, and they shouldn't ignore it. It's possible to come to a level of understanding about the abduction phenomenon. As an example, it's possible to come to a level of understanding about it, and then after a few years of study and of engaging and going to conferences and mixing with other people who are having the same experiences and so forth and so on, and immersing yourself in it for a while, it's possible to gradually withdraw from it and re-engage with something like a regular life, and still have this thing more settled in you. And getting a person to that level is Dave Jacobs said to me once, he used to work with people. If he decided to work with somebody, because he had between 1,000 and 1,500 people a year contact him and write letters to him and so forth. And after he'd gone through quite a long process to validate their experiences and counsel them as to what the consequences of looking into them might be, and did they really want to go ahead and engage with this. He'd sometimes work with people for 20 years, the same people for 20 years. And there's a number of people I know has worked with Dave for 20 years before he withdrew from the field in 2018. And he said to me one time, if somebody just stops contacting me, but I know that they're okay and they're living a normal life, and they haven't contacted me for 6 months or a year, I think that's fine. They've come to terms with it and they just don't want to go any further. That's fine by me. And He was most pleased that they kind of come to terms with it, and he'd help them in whatever small way to come to terms with the reality of it, and they'd managed to readjust their life, to fit into normal life again.
I actually had the privilege of speaking to Jacobs, and he did talk to me about that is the indicator to him when someone's healthier, that they can just find a way to acclimate this in their lives and move forward.
I mean, I always found Dave Jacobs really, really easy to work with, because he's very patient and very chatty, and just let me speak in my mind and so forth. And he rarely said anything, if you want to look into that, we can do it. We can look into it if you like. And I said, I'm really interested to know what happened there, because, the 2 hours went missing and I felt really strange afterwards, and this happened and that happened. And he'd very often just say, okay, so can you remember what happened next? And he'd be quiet for about 5 minutes, and then I'd say, well, yeah, I remember this. And he said, okay, and he's very, very slow and very kind of laid back, really. And I just found that very easy to accommodate, very easy to be. And I could understand why a lot of people wanted him to continue to work with him for 20 years. I couldn't understand that, because he had this very easy way of things.
So there's still a lot of options, a lot of things that people have to think about for how to get the best support. I feel like that key thing that you just mentioned with someone just listening can be so crucial. And I think that that's going to be really beneficial if people just want to learn to listen to each other I think, sometimes when people just get it out of their system and have someone listening to them, then they can adapt and say, okay, this isn't so bad. I can move forward now.
Very much so. Yeah.
Right.
There's something that kind of transects with that, which is completely different. Do we really want to understand what this thing was all about? Do we really want to understand what these orbs are and what they're up to, and are they intelligently controlled? Where do they fit in? And there's so many things about this phenomena. If we really want to study the whole thing and come to understand what's happening, you've got to kind of maybe, I don't know, if you prioritize that, you maybe not always as the psychological welfare of the experiencer is not always number one priority.
Right.
I mean, John Mack used to say, that's his primary concern was, because he was trained as a psychiatrist, his primary concern was the therapeutic value of counseling abductees.
Right.
Not everybody's been of that attitude. Some people find it it's more important to them to understand what's going on, and particularly if they're not experiencers, it's a lot of advantages if you yourself are not experiencing esoteric and anomalous things in your own life. Your own life is kind of very mundane and straightforward, but you're an anchor then, and a reliable person to deal with, if an abductee is going to go to. But are you going to get paid, and do you need to? Do you have independent means of these questions that you have to ask yourself?
Right.
If you're a therapist,
it's a good point though.
and who's going to pay you?
Right. It's a good point though that sometimes when someone is also an experiencer, they very much have a bias about what may be going on. And that's something that we hope to talk to people about in the future, about putting aside that bias. Because some people, you've probably heard the arguments of they're good, they're bad, they're good to us or bad for us, and then people don't agree on that, which could be for a lot of different reasons, including some of them may be experiencing something and having to justify it as it was a good experience, or they're experiencing something that is actually good, or they're experiencing a subgroup that's good or bad or whatever. There's so many questions. So I think it's very important for someone who is also an experiencer that's treating someone to put those biases aside, because your experience may not be the same as the person you're talking to. And that's tricky for people. Yep, but there's a lot to deal with and a lot to mull over for sure. I'll ask you my last question. Can you tell people how they can find you if they need to ask you any questions?
If you go to a website, outoftimebook.info, info, out of time book, one word, .info. There's a contact form on there, and several hundred people so far have contacted me through that channel. I always respond to people. I may not respond to you immediately, particularly if I'm away from home or busy, or I've had a very large volume of mail, but I eventually will respond to you, usually within a week, and sometimes a lot quicker than that.
Well, thank you so much for coming today and for providing all of this information to listeners. And thank you for all the people who listened today. It was a pleasure to speak to you today. I feel like we could have probably gone for hours and hours and hours because there's so much to go over.
We can do it again anytime you want. If you want to go into some other aspects of this, we can have another chat. We can do it anytime. Yeah.
Well, in the meantime, I hope you have a wonderful rest of your day. And to
Thank you,
everyone
dear.
who listened, thank you so
Thank you, dear.
much.
Thank you.